Good morning. I'm Berta Gardner. I'm the leader of the Senate Democratic Caucus, and I'm joined here by Representative Chris Tuck, who is the leader of the Alaska Independent Democratic Coalition, Senator Bill Wielechowski from East Anchorage J-Bear, and Representative Sam Kito from Juneau. We have entered an extended legislative session. In the last days, both the House and Senate have spent some late nights at the Capitol, and frankly, we've been busy working on bills that could have been voted on months ago when we had an empty calendar. We've taken lots of precious remaining time on things that are not priorities for Alaskans. We've been exhaustively debating divisive legislation or bills that could simply wait. On the 90th day, one of our members in the House even had to stand up during a floor session to ask why we were talking almost an hour about a specialized license plate bill when there was clearly more important work to be done. The Republican majority had one constitutionally mandated job: to come up with a budget. By law, that's supposed to be in 90 days. They knew this long before session even started, but as it stands right now, we've nothing but wrangling over how much to cut from things Alaskans hold dear, whether it's too much or way too much. And even if we agreed on all of these things, a question that I've not heard an answer to, none of us have, is how are we going to pay for it? We don't know that either. This is not the way anyone makes a responsible budget, even in our own households with budgets that have far fewer zeros on the end. We need to know how much we're making before we can decide what to cut and what to spend. We've seen how the legislature operates when both parties are working together. We had a bipartisan working group from 2007 to 2012, and in that time put $16 billion into state savings accounts. Yes, it's true, oil prices were high then, but we put in place policies which gave us a fair share, and boy, are we glad of that now. We also passed good legislation. We avoided pointless and divisive issues that wasted time and strained our working relationships. We were a moderate body. We worked together. We know it can be done. But for the last 4 years, the legislature's been dominated by Republicans. They have a 2/3 majority in the House. They have a 3/4 majority in the Senate. They have all the leadership positions. They control all the committees. They decide what legislation moves and when or how it moves. They can vote in anything they want. So if there's a problem moving forward, if there's a problem prioritizing properly, we know exactly where to look. We've probably all had experiences as parents when you leave them in charge for a couple minutes, you come back and there's flour all over the kitchen floor and milk everywhere. You almost want to laugh, but it's a shambles, and it's time to start cleaning up before it gets worse. So we have laughed, but we do understand Alaskans' frustrations, and we are frustrated too. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Representative Chris Tuck, and then we'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Senator Gardner. Thanks for being here today. We did have a marathon of a floor session happening both in the House and the Senate on the 90th day of this Alaska legislature, 29th Alaska legislature. And it demonstrated that a lot can get done in a short amount of time. The public wanted us to get our work done in 90 days. We wanted to get our work done in 90 days. Unfortunately, now we're in day 92, still looking at the fiscal situation. We in no way have been obstructing the process. We have wanted to be part of the process. From day one, we wanted to share the burden and responsibility with the majority. We offered to have a caucus of the whole to where we can get rid of the minority-majority status, focus on the budget, and come to a solution together. We've also offered to have a Ways and Means Committee. That will help us see how each one of these individual revenue proposals can fit together, putting all the pieces together. One of the key components in coming up with a fiscal solution for the state of Alaska, one of the key puzzle pieces is the oil tax subsidies that the state of Alaska is paying out. That hugely affects our budget. It also hugely affects what our opportunities are for revenue for the state of Alaska. So that's the thing that we're focused on right now. Something that we still needs to be solved before we can move forward. And with that, we'll open up to questions.
Becky Borth, the Associated Press, Representative Tuck. Speaker also has talked about getting resolution on the oil and gas tax credit question as a key piece. For you though, if there's a resolution there, does that unlock the 3/4 vote, or does that just clear one thing away and then there's an additional fight over a 3/4 vote? How far does that resolution actually take us?
There's a lot of details that we still got to work out. There's still a lot of pieces that we need to consider. One of the things that we refuse to do, and that is to watch seniors, children, the disabled, taking these huge cuts and the oil industry being held harmless. So we're still looking at ways that we can fit all this together, but the key component, the key piece is still going to be these oil tax subsidies. Anybody else on that one?
Go ahead, Nat.
I guess I'm just curious specifically to get to get the legislation out of the way that needs to be out of the way. What do you think that the majorities need to do right now?
I think we're made very clear. Right now is the oil tax subsidies. We've got to solve that problem. We can't simply afford to keep down this path of subsidizing the richest industry in the world.
Yeah, let me. I mean, this is something. Oil is what has funded our government for the last 30 years. We've got a constitutional obligation to get the maximum benefit for the resource. And when Senate Bill 21 passed, we were promised a variety of things. Number one, we were promised by the former governor that we were going to get 1 million barrels a day, and all we needed was massive tax subsidies. Then we were told we stopped the drop. Right. Well, here's the production forecast that just came out. This was actually from the fall of last year. It's actually gotten worse than this. We haven't stopped the drop. We're not going towards 1 million barrels. In fact, if you look at that, where that line ends up in 10 years, we're going down to 300,000 barrels per day. This is the fundamental problem. This is why this is different than previous years, because in previous years we had increased oil production. We put in place a tax structure that does not get us more oil. It gets us less oil, in fact, and there's ticking time bombs that are loaded in this tax structure. And this is why this is so important to all of us, and quite frankly, is the most important thing that needs to be fixed. It's flawed across all price levels and across all time horizons, and here's why. It's got 5 ticking time bombs in this bill, Senate Bill 21, and the current oil tax structure. At low prices, you've got this ticking time bomb of refundable tax credits, which we are where we are right now, where we're paying out $707 million more in tax credits subsidies than we get in production taxes. That's ticking time bomb number one. That's at low prices. As prices start to rise, you then hit ticking time bomb number 2, which is this thing called net operating losses. The companies are able to take tax deductions and drive their taxes down to such a level that as prices start to rise, they get tax breaks as the prices rise, because they're taking the tax breaks from the losses they're incurring now. No one intended that. No one intended that. And to the point where in 2019, when oil hits $48 per barrel, the state of Alaska is paying out allowing the companies to write off $732 million. So as the prices start to rise, they get to write off the losses that they're incurring now. The third ticking time bomb is, as prices rise a little bit more, this issue of deductible tax credits, where the projections from last year were that at $70 oil, the deductible tax credits eat up $1.2 billion of revenue for the state. The fourth ticking time bomb is that as prices go up even more, we get no progressivity. So prices could go up to $100, and we get no progressivity from that. So oil companies will be making billions and billions and billions of dollars, and we'll still be in massive deficit spending. And then the final insult, the final ticking time bomb, is this issue of GVR, which says that all new oil, and virtually in the next couple of decades, virtually all oil that's produced is going to be considered new oil. We get virtually no taxes at all on that. And so, in fact, Dr. Scott Goldsmith has said it's a negative present value to the state of Alaska at many price ranges. So there's ticking time bombs all over. They need to be fixed, and that's our number one priority.
So I guess I just want to follow up and ask, I mean, you guys are saying the oil tax structure is a problem, and that's what needs to be fixed. But I'm trying to figure out, I think, how actually do you think the majority should fix it? Is it just, are you just saying they need to change their mind and agree with you, or should they be having different kinds of meetings, or should you guys be in on the meetings? Like, what are they not doing aside from agreeing with you that they could be doing right now?
Nat, we have filed legislation to fix this problem for years. We have proposed amendments on the floor to fix this problem for years, multiple amendments. I think they filed 45 amendments in the House Resources Committee to fix many of the problems. We filed amendments on the floor. They filed amendments on the floor. Over years. This has been an issue going on for years. They just ignore the problem. And so now we're saying we're drawing a line in the sand. You got to fix this problem. We can't say that we're going to condemn future Alaskans to losing their permanent funds, to taking taxes out of their pockets until we fix this problem. We've got to fix this problem. So if the majority needs to fix it, they control the whole building. They got a 3/4 majority in the Senate and a 2/3 majority in the House. They need to fix this problem. I don't know how else we can say that. I don't know how much more clear we can be about that. Alaskans want this problem fixed.
So before you start, I just want to say really quickly, Nat, that Senator Wielechowski has identified what the problems are. Now, there may be more than one way to fix it. We would say address these directly. But if they have a better proposal or even a different proposal that gets us there, tell us what it is. Because we know what the problems are, and they have to know what those problems are too.
Representative Kito.
Thank you. And we've had over 40 amendments proposed on the bills. The bigger issue, if you're looking at just the FY17 spend, is right now the governor's plan anticipated originally saving $500 million of expenses for the state of Alaska. If we still have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on tax credits, we're going to be in a situation where we're borrowing or we're taking from the permanent fund dividend to pay tax credits. So that's one of the biggest reasons we need to address that. We need to make sure that we're not increasing our state spending in order to pay oil companies.
Good morning, Liz Raines with KTDA. Anchorage Mayor Ethan Berkowitz was down here over the weekend, a former lawmaker, and he had some advice for legislators now. He said, you have to know what you want, and in that way both sides can know what they're negotiating for. And your caucus has said it doesn't have any must-haves other than this oil tax reform, but how do you go about negotiating a budget deal if you don't know specifically what you're negotiating for?
Well, I think it's very clear what we want to see. And we're just going to reiterate. We had amendment after amendment after amendment. All of them were rejected. So we've communicated what we want to see. And but I think we all agree, and you've heard even the speaker say, that a big component of fixing our fiscal situation is we have to have new revenue. And a big key piece of that, and I think you heard Representative Johnson say the same thing, is the oil tax credits. Now, when that bill hit the floor, we had a series of amendments. Some of them were very close. One did pass. It was a Seaton amendment. But what was clear is that right now we're all over the place on what we want to see as a solution. We're united. Actually, the Alaska Independent Democratic Coalition, we're united on our side, what we want to see. But the reason why that bill got kicked back over to rules is because it would have failed on the floor. And it would have failed for different reasons, but it still would have failed. We want to keep that alive. We want to keep things working. Chenault has a lot of different characters in his caucus. He's working it. He's trying to come up with a solution, and we're waiting to see what they were going to agree to amongst themselves to whether or not we're going to agree to that.
If I could just follow up. You mentioned that once that's taken care of, that there are still problems in the budget. You mentioned the cuts to seniors that you're not happy with. So beyond oil tax reform, what else are specific asks by the part of the minority?
Well, we want to make sure, we don't like to see the senior benefits cuts that we see right now. We don't like to see early education, the cuts in early education, whether it's parents as teachers, Best Beginnings, or the pre-K program. Those are the best bang for your dollars. That's how you save money. When you look at the crime bill that's coming through right now, there's a lot of stuff right there that we're going to have to make some investments in behavioral health, investments in drug and alcohol treatment, because that pays off dividends. It's the same way with early education. It pays off dividends. Once a child falls in remediation programs, it's very expensive to get them out. And we want to make sure our education dollars go as far as they can. So those are just some of the components. But again, if you look at the amendments that we ran on the floor, on the budget, which went to 4:30 in the morning discussing it, I think we've been very clear what we want to see in the budget. But this is just one component. There's many components that we have to look through before we get to CBR. Of course, the CBR vote, the Constitution Budget Reserve vote is going to be the last thing.
I'd just like to add that every legislator, individually and as a group, has things that they really care about that they want to see. But in terms of must-haves, the must-have is not only the oil tax credit, we want to preserve a permanent fund dividend program at the end of the day. We believe that that's critically important, not just to individual Alaskans, but also to small businesses and to communities across this state, large and small. So that is, and the dividend is one of the reasons that Alaska has the fourth best income distribution equity between low income and high income, the fourth best in the nation. And that's because of the dividend program. We want to retain that. We don't want to see less middle class and more people falling into poverty with bigger gaps. So for us, the big things are fix the oil tax credit giveaway and maintain some type of permanent fund dividend program. And of course, we are adamantly opposed to buying the state the LIO building in Anchorage, $3.2 million that's valued at $19 or $20 million. So if that money remains in the budget, we will rely on the governor and urge him to veto it.
Austin Baird from KTUU. Just two quick questions, kind of just to follow up on oil and gas tax credit reform. I guess, just yes or no, would you support and give up your votes to get to the 3/4 needed to draw from the CBR if there was not an oil production tax increase, and yes or no for something that hardens the tax, if there's nothing that hardens the tax floor, would you give up your votes?
It's going to be very difficult to do that. And I'm not going to make a decision on behalf of the caucus right here and right now on a yes or no answer. But I can tell you, we made it very clear again, and that's just simply going to be unacceptable.
Even if you can't say yes or no, I guess then what are the points that may be very difficult to give up the votes on? Can you just say very specifically, like what are the top three things that a reform package has to have to get your support?
Well, I think that one of the things that we're looking at is we're looking to see what these tax credits, the original purpose of these tax credits, and are we fulfilling those purposes? And who are receiving those tax credits, and do they really need it? One of the big problems that we have in making these decisions is we just do not get the information from the industry. We offered an amendment on the floor, two amendments actually, one that we will go in executive session for finding out this information. What are we buying for these tax credits? We have no idea. And if the industry wants these tax credits, then they need to reveal that information to us. If they don't want to reveal that information, then they don't have to take advantage of the tax credits. And then we offered another amendment to either do that in executive session or to do one in that the public would know overall. So until we know what we're getting for these things, there's got to be some major reforms. Sam.
Chris, thanks. So Senator Wielechowski laid out several of the problems that we see with the existing structure. One of the big discussions or issues we're going to have to address is how much money we're going to have to take out of the general fund to support a plan. And if we're taking too much money out of the general fund to support the tax credit plan, we're going to be in difficult straits to try and support other revenue measures because it's going to be a trade of spending here versus earning over here. And so I do think that if we look at some of those issues Senator Wielechowski laid out and we figure out someplace where we can get closer together without spending a whole bunch of state money, we will be moving forward.
Just one more quick question. What do you make of the bill introduced yesterday by House Rules?
It's definitely going to affect collective bargaining agreements. I'll let you know that the majority had met with labor leaders last year as we were solving the fiscal problem or the budget problem last year. And we see in the new bargaining agreements, state employees taking huge concessions. They're not taking any wage increases. They are actually paying more in their health benefits, and they are taking furloughs. So what does the majority now want the state employees to take? They're doing their part. We just got to make sure that industries such as the oil industries are doing their part as well.
And I'll just add that based on my conversations with some members of leadership, I don't believe that bill's going to move.
Becky Bohr, the Associated Press. Senator Wielechowski had laid out a number of items and said, we're drawing a line in the sand, but even the governor doesn't go as far as, reopening SB 121, or SB 21, doesn't get into the progressivity. For this fight for this year for Representative Tuck is because a lot of the hangup is on the House side. I mean, do you agree? Is this a collective line in the sand that we need to address 1 through 5 to be satisfied?
Well, one of the problems that we have in just the legislative process in general is you got 60 people all over the place. We saw an orchestrated event the other night showing that work is getting done. However, it was all majority personal legislation that got passed. Not a single House member got a bill passed. We had one Senate bill member, Senator Gardner, got a bill passed, but that was on behalf of the Ethics Committee. And so basically, when we look at trying to come to a solution, it really is going to take all of us working together. And it's kind of like an internal combustion engine that we saw the night of the 90th day session. And you see all these internal working parts taking place, all this stuff happening, but just a little puff of black smoke popped out and everybody was celebrating. We're not celebrating because we didn't get any traction on the budget. And to get traction, they have to work with us on this. And so we do have a path that we would like to see happen. The first one, of course, is going to be the oil tax credit subsidies.
Is work, Andrew Kito, Alaska Public Radio Network, is work being done on financing general obligation bond for the Port of Anchorage? Is it a priority for the Anchorage members? And if not, why not? There hasn't been a lot of talk of this. Obviously, this session's been focused on cuts, but is that important for you, or are you going to be spending time on that remaining time here in Juneau?
It's definitely a priority for our community of Anchorage, and the mayor's been here trying to work on something there. In terms of whether it's likely to move forward, I'm not optimistic about that right now. I think there are other more important issues for us to be spending time and effort on right now. We've talked about those extensively today. But the mayor is a very, very good negotiator. We'll see what he manages to do.
Just on that point, it is certainly for me important, and it's I think important for all Alaskans. 90% of all the goods that come into the state of Alaska come in through the port of Anchorage. It's it's a national security issue. In fact, you saw Jay Bear weigh in and say, "Hey, we need this port because we need to get military items in and out of the state." It's important, and if you don't think the port's important, and you're not, and something happens because the port is destabilized, hasn't been fixed properly, then just wait till the middle of the winter when we're not able to ship up goods up to Fairbanks, the interior, or Anchorage, or anywhere else in Alaska for that matter.
Matt Hurst, Alaska Dispatch News. Do you guys want to see a vote on the governor's income tax proposal?
The governor has an income tax proposal. The Republican majority has an income tax proposal as well. I don't know. It really depends on what form, what shape things. But what's really clear is that we're not even going to talk about that until we figure out what the oil tax solve the problem and the way it's going to be solved, because that alleviates the need for Alaskans to play such a big role in fixing the situation. I think we need to look at our resources, look at our industries, look at the opportunities that we have out there before we ask people to pull money out of their pockets, especially when we're paying out more in these oil subsidies than we're taking in production taxes.
Does that mean that a special session is going to be inevitable if the governor says, that that's a key part of his financial plan and that he's, not going to be satisfied until you guys have a complete plan?
Thanks, Nat. I think the decision of whether or not the governor brings us back in is going to be his decision. I do think that we have the time right now to be able to get some work done. If we don't, I do know that the community of Juneau is ready to step up if we do have a special session. I think keeping us here is important for keeping the pressure on, but there are lots of pieces that need to come together in order to get out. What we do know, I think what was mentioned a little bit earlier, that funding for the port project, a GO bond, that has to come if we have any closure or getting closer on a sustainable budget plan after we have a capital budget. And the capital budget right now is coming out of the Senate. We haven't seen it over in the House side, and it's significantly reduced from what the governor proposed. And so we really do need to make sure that we've got that component as well, because that's a lot of our construction industry. Hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funds are dependent on that capital budget. So there are lots of pieces that still have to come together. It can happen in the next week, but it may end up running into a special session.
And proof of that happening in the next week is we saw 45 bills go in 1 week alone. And we saw this weekend a marathon that happened. The marathon's not over. We need to keep going.
Liz Raisman, KTDA again. Just wanted to follow up on HB 379, the bill that would freeze state employee wages and link it to oil prices. Senator Gardner, you mentioned that from your conversations with the majority, you don't see that bill moving. Do you see this as just a political statement by some members, and does introducing legislation like this late in the game help at all in getting towards a budget deal?
I wouldn't say it's a political statement, because you never know somebody else's motives unless they tell you what their motives are. But I would say that it doesn't help in terms of people having trust in each other and in what we're doing, trying to do together here moving forward. It creates some divisiveness. Yeah.
And I'd like to weigh in a little bit on that. I think one of the things that's very difficult is when you have proposals that haven't been discussed in the legislature for the past 90 days come up, especially on the last day. It's very challenging because these are issues that are big and have long-ranging impacts, and to bring them in even as a discussion point at the last minute really kind of puts a little bit of a speed bump in the process. We have lots of pieces out on the table. We have the ability to work with those pieces out on the table that are there right now without putting something else on that can be a distraction.
And I'll just add one thing, and that is that it only got a finance referral. And clearly, it's a question of state policy. It should have gone to state affairs. It could have been considered in any number of other committees. And it's sort of cutting short the public process, and we're seeing a big pattern of that. When there were 4 bills introduced several weeks ago, that was 200, Senate Bills 200, 7, 8, 9, and 10. We argued for appropriate referrals. They all went to finance, and I think 2 of them are probably permanently off the table, and we'll see what happens with the other 2. There is a process. It develops confidence in the results. It allows for proper vetting and for stakeholders to participate in the process. When something that is a major policy shift goes to only one committee, people won't have confidence in it, and it may be a signal that it's not well thought out or ready for prime time to begin with.
Austin Baird from,
Yeah, go ahead.
Austin Baird from KTUU. I was just going to ask about the lawsuit from the Democratic Party over independents being able to register and run in the Democratic primary being thrown out of Superior Court yesterday. What do you make of that decision?
Thanks for letting us know, because I'm not following that. We're focused on the budget, focused on legislative stuff right now. That's probably a better question to talk to the party. And I was unaware. I'm focused on legislative issues.
Do you want to take that?
No.
Okay, well, I know that there have been similar situations nationally, historically, and the Supreme Court has upheld the right of political parties to determine who can participate in their activities. So I expect that will be appealed and is a case that will be won.
Time for one more.
Just going back, I'm not quite sure I got an answer the last time when I had asked about the different pieces and how far to push on credit, so I'll ask again. But then also, you mentioned that that the speaker is trying to come up with a solution, waiting to see what they can agree on themselves. Can you characterize the nature of talks that you're having with the speaker right now, how far they're going, and is that really what's happening? Are you waiting to see for them to present you a tax credit plan to say yes or no and keep going back and forth like that?
Well, in negotiations, you do have things going back and forth. I met with the speaker this morning. We're trying to figure out what the oil tax solution is going to be. Right now, he's got a lot of members all over the map on where to go on this, and for different reasons, the bill would not have passed that night. There's some people that say it doesn't go far enough. There's other people that say it's going too far. So to find a consensus is the work that we're doing now. All right, thank you for being with us this next week on day 92 of the legislative session. A lot of components, a lot of details still need to be ironed out, and everyone's working together to make that happen. Thank you.